I remember the first night. I wandered into the forest alone. The fog had settled like a soft quilt over the mossy ground, muffling every sound except my own uneven breaths. Pale light from my flickering lantern barely reached the twisted roots and gnarled branches that seemed to lean in closer with each step. Somewhere, far ahead, a faint hum pulsed through the darkness, neither mechanical nor natural, but steady and knowing. I paused, hearing the rustling of leaves, though the wind had long since died down, and felt the hair on my neck rise as if unseen eyes were tracing me. The deeper I walked, the more the familiar world dissolved behind me, replaced by shadows that moved just beyond vision. Every footfall seemed to echo twice, once on the ground, and once somewhere else, just out of reach. I wanted to turn back, but curiosity held me fast. That's when I saw it, a pale figure, standing perfectly still, watching me through the fog. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Dusk had fallen like a soft blanket, and the fog hung low, curling around the trunks of pine trees. The air smelled of damp earth, and the faint tang of pine resin lingered on my tongue. I walked slowly along the narrow path. My footsteps were muffled by the thick carpet of needles. Somewhere, the wind whispered, or maybe it wasn't the wind at all. It sounded like my name, soft, drawn out, just at the edge of hearing. I stopped. Nothing moved, yet the whispers lingered, curling between the trees like smoke. Branches swayed above me. No breeze touched the forest. Each pine needle trembled under the pale light of the moon. They glistened as if wet, though the air was dry, and I felt my chest tighten. I moved again, cautiously. The path narrowed, swallowed by mist. I imagined shadows twisting among the trunks. A rustle too deliberate, a breath of movement, heavier than the wind, pressed against the back of my neck. I froze. From the treeline, a figure detached itself. It glided, almost floating, silent and pale. Its shape was thin, too long, and impossibly still. I wanted to call out. I wanted to run. But the air around me thickened, slowed. My voice didn't work. The shadow paused as if listening. I could feel it watching with something older than thought. Even the fog seemed to shiver. And the whispers grew, circling, echoing my own name over and over. The ground beneath my feet felt soft, almost hollow. Each pine needle I touched left a cold trace on my skin. I pressed my hands to my chest. A static hum seemed to vibrate in the air, pressing lightly against my ears. I tried to tell myself it was just the trees, just the fog, just imagination. But the shadow had moved closer, and in its passing, the forest smelled differently, sharp, metallic, like copper and water. I took another step. The fog parted around the path, revealing nothing but more fog. And yet, I knew I was not alone. Something followed me, gliding just beyond my vision. I stopped again. The moonlight pooled on the needles, pale and trembling. Branches arched over me, skeletal fingers swaying without reason. I could feel the shadow's presence press against the fog, thick and patient. I whispered my name back to it, softly, curious if it would answer. It didn't. Only the silence returned. But in the silence, I could hear my own heartbeat, stretched slow and hollow, and the faintest rustle always just behind me. I tried to walk faster, but my legs felt heavy, as if the forest itself held me. Every step was muffled, absorbed by the damp needles and fog. And the whispers, they were patient now, circling, waiting. I looked down the path. It disappeared into silver mist. No shadows, no light, just fog curling endlessly. Then I saw it again, a movement in the corner of my eye, slow, deliberate, sliding over the needles without sound. And I realized it had been following me the entire time. The forest smelled of pine and rain, and something else, something that made my stomach turn. I didn't want to breathe. I didn't want to move. I stopped, and the shadow stopped. We lingered there together, the fog between us, quiet and waiting. I turned slowly, trying to see its face. There was only darkness, only stillness, only the whisper of my name, faint as wind through pine. And then I walked on, careful, slow, the shadow gliding just beyond my sight, the fog curling around me, soft and patient. I don't know how far I went. I don't know if I left the forest at all. Only that the whispers never stopped. Only that the moonlight never left the pine needles. Only that I could still feel it, always in the quiet. The woods were silent. Not the kind of silence that comforts, but the thick, holding kind. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, caught in the branches. I found the campsite deep in the trees. Ashes lay cold in a circle of stones. The air smelled faintly of wet earth, moss, and something older, almost forgotten. A lantern sat upright near the edge of the fire pit. Its light flickered, small and uneven, though I could see no hand had lifted it. Smoke curled upward, thin and pale, tasting faintly of damp wood. I stepped closer. The flame dimmed. Closer still, and it grew again. A quiet rhythm, like it was breathing with me. The air felt heavier. The needles underfoot pressed damp against my shoes. Each step made the silence shiver, stretching longer between the trees. I could see it then. At the edge of the clearing, a figure paused, pale in the lantern's glow. Just for a blink, and it was gone, vanished like mist, leaving only the faintest ripple in the shadows. The lantern shivered again, a whisper of movement through the branches. I could feel it watching, waiting, patient as the fog curling around the clearing. I knelt beside the fire pit. The stones were cold, rough against my palms. Ash crumbled under my touch, like dry snow. The lantern flickered closer, or maybe I had moved closer. It didn't matter. I tried to tell myself it was just the forest playing tricks. But the flame's rhythm was deliberate, almost knowing. Every dim, every flare felt like a heartbeat. I caught my reflection in the lantern's glass. Pale, small, uncertain, and for a moment the figure appeared again. Closer this time, just beyond the edge of the glow. I blinked. Gone. Only the lantern remained, steady now, gentle against the dark. I breathed. The smoke drifted toward me, carrying the smell of wet earth and something faintly metallic like iron. I felt it coil around my chest, soft and unrelenting. Saw footsteps, or maybe my own, shifted in the needles. The clearing stretched around me, impossibly still. Every shadow seemed to move, even when I didn't. I watched the lantern flicker. It waited. For what? I could not know. I rose slowly. Every movement echoed in the hollow quiet. The figure did not return, and yet I felt its presence fold around the fog. The fire pit was cold. The smoke thinned, disappearing into the night. The lantern's flame swayed once, then held steady. I stepped away. The forest swallowed my footprints quickly. The clearing remained behind me, quiet and expectant. Even now, when I think of it, I can see the lantern's glow. Small, patient, always waiting. And I wonder if it waits for anyone else who comes too close to the silence. Twilight draped the trail in heavy gray shadows. The trees pressed close, their branches low, sticky with dew. The air smelled of damp leaves and soil, thick and pressing. My own steps sounded soft, swallowed quickly by the moss and dirt. But something else moved too, a pace almost matching mine. Soft, deliberate. I stopped. The echo stopped. I moved again. It moved again, always just behind me. The leaves underfoot cracked like brittle glass. But when I glanced back, there was nothing but the gray folding in on itself. And still, I felt eyes pressing into my back, patient and cold. The hum of insects faded. The forest seemed to hold its breath. A pause so complete it pressed against my ears, my skin, my chest. I whispered to myself, soft, to hear my own voice in the heavy quiet. It didn't help. The footsteps never ceased. The fog thickened in the spaces between the trees. It curled around my ankles, damp and cold. Every shadow deepened, folding into another. I imagined something gliding between the trunks, always just out of sight. My heartbeat echoed louder than the invisible steps. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig made my chest tighten. I wanted to call out, to hear a human voice answer. But the silence pressed back, heavier than the forest. I slowed my pace. The footsteps slowed too. Every step felt measured, deliberate, almost patient. I glanced back. Nothing. The path behind me was empty, gray, silent. And yet I could feel it, the weight of presence, lingering just beyond perception. I pressed my hands to my sides. The cold dampness of the fog seeped through my sleeves. I smelled wet earth and pine and something else. Something metallic, faint, almost a warning I couldn't name. I walked again, and again the echo followed. It was not my shadow, not my shape, but it mirrored my rhythm perfectly, without form. The trail narrowed, branches brushing my shoulders. I could feel the forest lean closer, listening. Holding, each crack of leaves beneath my shoes seemed louder now. Each pause stretched into a silence that pressed like a weight on my chest. I turned my head slowly. The path behind me remained gray, empty, but the sensation persisted, cold and watchful. I wanted to run. I wanted to feel the path widen under my feet, but my legs would not obey, and the footsteps remained, steady, endless. The light faded further. Shadows pooled, deep and still, but never empty. Every shadow seemed to quiver, breathe, wait, and I felt it there, somewhere, always behind. I tried to imagine it gone, a trick of twilight, fog, exhaustion, but even in thought, the weight pressed. The forest seemed to echo my own unease. I stopped again. The footsteps halted too. Silence settled over the trail, heavy, patient. I could feel the presence, just beyond sight, waiting. I moved once more, step by careful step, along the narrowing path. The fog wrapped me in a damp embrace. The footsteps did not resume. I dared not look back again. The trail stretched ahead, gray and quiet, and though the hum of insects returned slowly, softly, I knew the forest had not released me. I could still feel it, lingering just behind. The forest was quiet, heavy with late afternoon shadows. Damp earth smelled sharp between the trees, mingled with the faint sweetness of moss. A path narrowed toward an ancient oak, massive and still, its branches scraping the gray sky. The tree's trunk was hollow. A dark cavity yawned like a mouth waiting to speak. I stepped closer, drawn in by the shadow, drawn in by something I couldn't name. Inside, the hollow whispered. Soft scratches etched along the wood, uneven, deliberate. They moved like wind caught in a narrow space, curling, shifting. I leaned in. The smell hit me first, damp soil and something metallic, almost warm. My breath trembled in my chest. The darkness inside seemed to pulse, alive with waiting. I saw it then, a fleeting reflection, small and quick, eyes staring back. Not my own. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The bark felt rough against my palms, cold and damp. I shivered, the forest pressing close, almost holding its breath. The hollow seemed to breathe with me. Every scratch, every whisper grew faintly louder. I imagined shapes moving in the shadows, curving, stretching just beyond sight. A soft hum rose from somewhere inside the tree. It was low, vibrating to the ground into my shoes. The air smelled of wet wood and iron. My pulse echoed in my ears. I wanted to turn away. The forest felt heavier here, pressing in with muted expectation. And yet, I couldn't stop staring. Another glance into the hollow. Movement. But when I blinked, only darkness remained. The eyes had vanished. Only the whispers lingered. I pressed my hands to my chest. The scratches seemed to stretch into the shadows. The hollow felt endless. A black mouth in the middle of the gray forest. I took a step back. The tree loomed patient, waiting. Branches scraped the sky like brittle fingers. I felt the weight of unseen eyes, cold and constant. A breeze stirred, but the hollow was still. The whispers slowed, curling, fading into the stillness of the forest. Yet the tension lingered, pressing into the space between trees, into my lungs. I moved away slowly. Each step made the damp leaves crumble softly beneath my feet. The metallic smell hung, fading gradually. The hum dissolved into the distant quiet. The hollow remained, dark and patient, watching, waiting. I could feel it even as I walked away, a shadow pressing softly into the edges of my vision. The forest returned to silence. Only the memory of eyes, fleeting in whispers, curling like smoke in the hollow of the ancient tree. And I walked on, heart still tight, the sense of being watched lingering long after the trunk disappeared behind me. Morning fog drifted in thick, curling swirls around my legs. It clung to my shoes, damp and heavy, smelling faintly of wet earth and pine. Each step felt slower than the last, as if the fog itself resisted my movement. The trees shifted behind me. I could swear they leaned closer, trunks bending where they had been still moments before. Branches brushed my shoulders lightly, though no wind stirred. Every familiar landmark dissolved. The path I had followed vanished into gray. The trail stretched endlessly, folding over itself in impossible angles. A shadow moved in the mist. I froze. It halted immediately, as though it mirrored me, patient, waiting. I took another step. It stepped again. I stopped. It stopped. The rhythm pressed into my chest, slow and deliberate. The fog thickened around my ankles, wet and clinging. My breath rose in soft clouds, pale against the gray, disappearing almost as soon as it left me. The forest smelled sharper now. Damp leaves, iron, and something that felt almost wrong, almost metallic. I moved forward, careful, but the forest seemed to fold in on itself. Trees rearranged silently, shifting closer, narrowing the path. Every step made the damp needles and moss give way underfoot, crumbling softly. The shadow lingered at the edge of my vision, always there, yet impossible to focus on. I tried to tell myself it was fog and light playing tricks, but the low hum began, soft, vibrating, like the forest itself held its breath. It filled my ears. It pressed into my chest, into my bones. I quickened my pace. The hum deepened, stretching low and steady, vibrating through the mist. I glanced back. Nothing. Only fog and shadow and the sense of being followed. But I could feel it in my skin, in the damp hair at my nape, pressing gently, insistently. I stumbled, caught on a root hidden beneath the fog. The shadow halted, distant now, but patient. I scrambled forward, hands brushing wet leaves, the smell of earth thick in my nose. The forest folded again. Every tree seemed taller, darker, stretching upward and inward. The path became a corridor of gray, endless and echoing. My own footsteps sounded loud, impossibly loud, bouncing in the heavy air. The fog swirled faster, curling around my legs, climbing my calves, soaking my shoes. The shadow moved with me, always with me, silent, waiting. I could hear the forest hum, low and constant, vibrating like a pulse. It pressed into my chest, into my mind. I wanted to run, but the fog tangled my legs. It clung, unyielding, patient. I blinked. The shadow was closer now. I could see nothing but its vague form in the gray, a presence without edges, without name. I tried to breathe quietly. The fog filled my lungs with damp, heavy air. The hum pulsed in time with my heartbeat, slow, deliberate. Every step I took seemed mirrored. I moved again, careful, slow, pressing forward. The fog shifted, curling, folding over itself. Trees leaned in, yet still the shadow followed. Always behind, always patient. Eventually, the path widened, the fog thinned. Sunlight broke weakly through the gray, pale and trembling. The forest hum faded, leaving only the soft, damp smell of leaves and earth. I walked on, legs stiff, heart still tight. The shadow had gone, or maybe it had never left. I could still feel it pressing at the edges of my vision, lingering in the fog that clung to my shoes, my sleeves, my hair. And even as the trail opened to clear ground, the forest remained patient, quiet, its low, vibrating hum still alive somewhere, just out of reach. The ranger station sat in ruin, hidden beneath a tangle of moss and ivy. The wood was soft, rotting, and the windows stared blankly at the fog that rolled across the forest floor. Morning light was pale and hesitant, sliding over broken shutters and shattered glass. Inside, the air was heavy, damp, smelling of mold and old pine. Dust rose in slow clouds as I stepped across the creaking floorboards. Each step felt swallowed by silence. Then I heard it. A radio, old and cracked, resting in the corner. Static hissed from it, sharp and stuttering, like fragments of whispered voices. I leaned closer. The burst repeated something familiar. My own voice, clipped and broken, threading through the static. It was soft, distorted, echoing in the corners of the room. I reached out. The radio was cold, almost painfully so, biting through my fingers, As I touched it, the hum of static faded. The room fell into a silence that pressed against my ears. Thick and unyielding, the fog pressed against the windows. It rolled closer, curling around the broken panes, damp and heavy. I could smell the wet earth, the forest breathing against the thin glass. It seemed alive, pressing in, patient. I stepped back, chest tightening. The radio remained still, silent now, but I could feel the static lingering in the air, a pulse beneath the quiet. Shadows moved across the walls, stretching, folding with the pale light. I touched the wood of a table, rough and damp. A faint metallic tang lingered in the air, subtle, almost unnoticed until I focused. The moss outside glistened to the glass, ghostly and green, swaying though no breeze moved it. I sat on the floor. The silence wrapped around me, slow, deliberate, thick with expectation. The faint hum of the forest beyond seemed distant, muted, pressed away by the fog and the walls. The radio whispered again, tiny sparks of static breaking the quiet, but the fragments of my voice were gone, leaving only the sense that it had been speaking something I should have recognized. I pressed my palms to the floor, cold and damp, grounding myself in the small, still space. Outside, the fog rolled in thicker, curling against the edges of broken glass, wrapping the station in gray, quiet, suffocating. I could hear my breath, soft and quick, mingling with the faint hum of the world beyond. The shadows lingered. The radio sat still, patient. The moss and fog and rot pressing together, blurring the boundary between the room and the forest, inside and outside, now and always. I stood, slowly, carefully. The static had faded, the whispers gone, but the sense of being watched remained, lingering in every corner, in every crack of light, in the damp air itself. And as I stepped toward the door, the fog pressed even closer. I felt it brush my sleeves, my hair, my skin. The forest waited just beyond the glass, patient, still. I left the station. The radio was quiet, the shadows settled. But the silence that followed, it did not release me. I could still feel the static lingering in the air, folded into the fog that pressed against the windows, soft, waiting, eternal. I followed the familiar trail. The forest smelled of damp pine and wet earth, heavy in the morning light, leaves pressed under my feet, soft and yielding, yet uneven where roots rose strangely from the ground. The trees shifted as I moved, not like the wind, not like ordinary sway. Branches twisted, curling into shapes that hinted at faces, eyes and bark, mouths opening silently. Signs I knew well were distorted, broken, or simply gone. A marker I had passed countless times now leaned at an impossible angle. The path I thought I knew stretched and folded, unfamiliar yet somehow familiar. A soft glow floated ahead. It hovered above the moss, pale and warm, drawing me deeper. It didn't flicker like sunlight through leaves. It waited, patient, unblinking. I stepped closer. Roots rose around me like fingers, twisting into shapes that pressed against my ankles and shins. The earth smelled richer here, damp and metallic, like rain on iron. I glanced back. The trail behind me seemed to have shifted. No familiar markers remained. The trees closed in, leaning closer, pressing shadows along the ground. The glow pulsed faintly. Each step toward it made the branches seem to lean further, their bark curling into faces, whispering without sound. I could feel the forest holding its breath. The air was dense, thick with mist and the smell of wet needles. Every rustle of leaves underfoot seemed louder than it should, echoing off the unseen edges of the path. Soft footsteps followed, but not mine. Slow, deliberate, patient. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that the trail had not changed. But my chest tightened with every step. The glow floated ahead, unchanging, guiding me deeper into the unknown. The roots and branches grew more twisted. The forest seemed to pulse, to shift beneath me, bending the familiar into shapes I didn't recognize. Even the light felt altered, warmer, yet faintly wrong. I reached out to the tree. Its bark was rough, damp, and I felt the faint hum of energy beneath my fingers. A whisper rose in my chest, low and unformed, echoing along the path. It was not a sound, not a voice, but I knew I was being watched. The soft glow drifted a little closer with each step. I moved forward, slow, careful, trying to sense the boundaries of this changed place. The forest stretched endlessly, folding in on itself, a corridor of mist and twisted wood. I realized then, the path I had walked countless times was no longer mine. Every familiar landmark was gone, replaced by the shifting, watching forest. The trail had become something else. The glow hovered just ahead, steady and patient. I could feel the forest leaning, pressing, breathing around me. Every shadow seemed alive, every root a waiting hand. I stopped. The mist curled around my ankles, damp and heavy. The air hummed softly, vibrating through my chest. The forest waited with me, patient and unyielding. I stepped back slowly, but the path had already shifted again. The glow remained faint, soft, beckoning. I could feel the eyes in the bark, patient, unblinking. The trail was no longer mine, and I could not say where it would lead. I moved again, careful, deliberate, soft. The forest shifted with each step. The glow floated, patient, always ahead. And I walked, knowing the path I followed belonged to forest now, not to me. Bird song faded as twilight seeped into the forest. The air smelled damp, like moss and rain-soaked leaves, heavy and still. Shadows pooled between the trunks, stretching long and pale. I looked up. Pairs of glowing eyes hovered high in the branches. They blinked in unison, slow, deliberate, following me without sound. Movement above seemed impossible. No creature should hang so perfectly still. Yet there they were. Branches shifted faintly, brushing together, though the air was still. The forest hummed quietly, a low vibration under my feet. Twigs cracked beneath my steps, soft and uneven. Every rustle made my chest tighten. I tried to step around the clearing. The eyes remained, unwavering. Each blink mirrored my own heartbeat, slow and deliberate, pressing into the gray light. Shadows leaned closer. The smell of wet pine and earth thickened in the air. I felt the faint brush of wind, or perhaps the wings of something too high to see, against my face. I ran. Leaves whipped my ankles. Branches tugged at my sleeves. The eyes never left. Always above, always watching. The forest seemed to stretch, elongating the trail beneath me. Every tree leaned in, skeletal fingers arching overhead. The twilight deepened, folding shadows into the gaps between trunks. My breath rose in clouds, soft and visible in the cooling air. I stumbled, caught on roots hidden beneath damp leaves. The eyes blinked again, patient, deliberate. They did not falter. I paused, chest tight, hands pressing my knees. The forest hummed faintly, vibrating to the soles of my shoes. Every rustle echoed louder than it should. I looked up, still the glowing eyes, high above, unwavering. The branches curved in impossible ways, as if shaping themselves to keep sight of me. I tried to step sideways, to break their line of vision. The eyes shifted with me, slow, patient, always following. Twilight pooled on the forest floor, pale and trembling. A breeze stirred. It carried the scent of wet moss and iron. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting. I ran again, faster, careful to avoid roots and low-hanging branches. The eyes never left, blinking in unison, patient and unyielding. I felt their gaze pressing into my back, into my skin. Every step echoed. Every heartbeat thrummed in time with their blinking. The shadows above seemed alive, folding, stretching, waiting. Finally, I slowed. The clearing opened slightly, pale light spilling through thinning trees. The eyes lingered in the branches, distant but patient. They did not disappear. I took a cautious step forward. The forest remained silent, the humming faint but present. The twilight folded softly over the clearing, gray and cold. And even as I moved on, the memory of those glowing eyes stayed, watching, patient, waiting. The morning fog hung low, curling off the blackened stream. Its surface shimmered faintly, dark and unwelcoming. The air smelled damp, earthy, with a hint of something metallic. A narrow bridge crossed the water. The planks groaned under my weight, echoing softly into the mist. Each step pressed against the silence, stretching it thin. Halfway across, the stream below rippled. Shadows moved beneath the surface, shapes too dark to name. The water smelled faintly of iron and decay, cold and heavy. I paused, hand on the railing. The fog clung to my sleeves, cold and wet. I could feel the weight of the forest pressing in, patient and still. I reached the end of the bridge. The path ahead seemed endless, folding into gray. No familiar markers. No horizon. Only fog and shadows. Then I felt it. A hand gripped the railing. Slow, deliberate, firm. I looked down, mine was empty. The planks groaned under my shifting weight. The stream murmured faintly, ripples brushing against unseen forms. Mist rose higher, curling around my legs, wrapping soft and damp. I stepped forward. The fog thickened. Every shadow seemed to lean closer, stretching with the pale light. The grip on the railing remained. No warmth, no shape, just presence. Patient, waiting. I pressed my hands to the wood, rough and cold. The stream shimmered beneath, black and restless. Shapes move in the water, impossible and dark, slipping beneath the surface like smoke. I tried to call out. My voice felt swallowed by the fog, fading before it left my lips. The forest held its breath. The bridge stretched longer than it should. Each plank creaked in response to my weight, a slow, rhythmic echo. The hand remained, ghostly and patient. I took another step. The mist swirled tighter around my ankles, cold and persistent. The shadows in the water shifted again. I turned slowly, eyes straining for figure. Nothing, only fog, black water, and the endless gray path ahead. The forest was silent now. Even the stream held its breath, dark and still beneath the bridge. And yet, the sense of being watched persisted. I moved forward, careful, slow. Each step pressed into the wet planks, the mist curling over my shoes. The hand on the railing remained, and I could feel its weight in the air around me. At the far side, the path still stretched endlessly into gray. No trees, no markers, no horizon. Only fog, mist, and shadows. I stepped off the bridge. The hand released, or perhaps it had never been there. The water shimmered, black and still once more. And as I walked into the endless gray, I could feel the weight of the bridge behind me, the sense of presence, patient and unyielding, lingering in the mist, in the cold wood, in the black water below. The forest was quiet, heavy with late afternoon shadows. Damp earth smelled sharp, mingled with the faint sweetness of moss. A hollow opened in the ground, dark and deep, curling into the mist. A soft hum rose from it, low and monotone, vibrating through the air, brushing my skin. It pressed into my chest, resonating with each heartbeat, slow and steady. I stepped closer. The hum grew louder, folding into my thoughts. It was not just sound. It was pressure, a rhythm that seemed to pulse inside me. Fog clung to the hollow, curling around my ankles, damp and cold. Faint silhouettes moved at the edges of my vision. They were just shapes, hazy and incomplete, but impossible to ignore. I crouched, knees pressed to the earth, listening. The hum entered more deeply then, brushing my mind like a breeze over water. My own breath rose in soft clouds, mingling with the fog, warm against the chill. The silhouettes swirled slowly, hovering in the gray, always at the periphery. They moved with purpose, circling, patient and deliberate. I wanted to blink, to see them clearly, but the edges of my vision refused to reveal them. The hollow seemed alive. Its walls breathed with me, contracting and expanding, pulsing with the hum. The air smelled richer, damp and metallic, like rain on iron. Each inhalation pressed a vibration further into my chest. I rose slowly, careful not to disturb the rhythm. The fog shifted with me, curling and twisting like a living thing. When I looked around, the hollow itself had changed. The edges I had seen before were now different, as if the space had rearranged itself in the seconds I had crouched. Soft footsteps, almost imagined, pressed through mist. The silhouettes continued their slow orbit, patient, unblinking. The hum followed me, stretching outward, filling the forest with low, vibrating presence. I pressed my palms to the cool earth. The vibration traveled to my fingers, into my arms, slow and insistent. The hollow breathed beneath me, alive and aware, folding shadows into its misty depths. I stepped back. The forest remained still, yet nothing felt unchanged. Branches leaned closer, fog curling higher, and the silhouettes lingered just beyond clarity. The hum receded slightly as I moved, but the pulse remained in my chest, slow, hypnotic, impossible to shake. Every breath carried it, low and monotone, pressing against the edges of my mind. I turned, taking one last look into the hollow. Shadows and fog danced together, shifting as if the space itself were breathing. The silhouettes were still there, patient, circling, unseen but known. I walked away slowly, careful, soft. The hum lingered in the air behind me, faint now, yet vibrating in my chest. The hollow had not released me, and I knew it never would. The clearing should have been familiar. I smelled damp pine and moss, felt the soft give of the earth beneath my shoes. But everything looked wrong. Tents lay in disarray, their fabrics sagging and damp. Embers glowed faintly in the fire pit, cold and red, as if reluctant to burn. A faint smoke drifted, smelling of wet ash and earth. Footprints circled the clearing endlessly. They looped over themselves, overlapping, never leading away. Each step seemed impossible, yet they pressed deep into the soil. I noticed a backpack, forgotten among the tents. It smelled faintly of leather and damp cloth. I knelt, lifting the flap. Inside, a note, my own name scrawled in handwriting I did not remember writing. The forest pressed closer. Branches leaned in like skeletal fingers, shadows thickening under the pale light. I felt eyes on me, unseen but insistent. The clearing shifted in the mist. Tents seemed to stretch, moved slightly when I blinked. Even the embers pulsed, tiny breaths of warmth against the cold that pressed my skin. I stepped back, boots sinking softly into the damp soil. The footprints seemed to follow, curling, endless, patient. The air smelled heavier now, wet leaves, iron, something faintly metallic. A soft hum rose from the edges of the clearing, not loud but persistent, vibrating through my chest. I pressed my hand to my ears, but it remained subtle, insistent. I wanted to run, yet every path I took led me in a circle, back to the disarray, back to the note with my name. The forest seemed to pulse, breathing around me, patient and watchful. Shadows shifted. The tents leaned, as if the clearing itself were folding. I could feel the weight of something unseen pressing against my back, gentle but undeniable. The fog thickened. It curled around my ankles, soft, damp, clinging. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a twig made my heart tighten. I left the backpack. I didn't dare look back, though I could feel the clearing watching, patient. Each step carried the weight of the forest's claim, heavy and silent. The footprints remained, endless, curling into themselves. The embers faded, leaving only shadows and fog. The smell of wet earth lingered, metallic and sharp, pressing into my senses. I walked faster, soft footsteps swallowed by the mist. Branches scratched lightly at my arms, the forest folding behind me. The clearing had claimed something. I could feel in my chest, a weight I could not shake. And even as I left, the echo of my own name lingered in the damp air. The lost campsite waited quietly, patient, folded into the fog, the shadows, the forest itself. The storm had passed. The forest smelled of wet pine and broken wood, heavy and earthy. Branches lay scattered, jagged, twisted, reaching skyward like fingers. Above me, some still hung, broken and swaying. They moved toward me, slow and deliberate, brushing against my shoulders as if curious. The air smelled faintly of rain and ozone, cold against my skin. Shadows stretched unnaturally. My own shadow bent, elongated, curling along the wet leaves. Every step I took seemed mirrored, multiplied, pressed by the trees. A soft whisper drifted on the wind. I couldn't place the words, only a pull, gentle and insistent. It urged me to stay, to linger among the twisted branches. The forest was still, yet alive. The branches twisted slowly, following the wind, or perhaps following me. Every rustle made my heart tighten. I stepped back. Leaves stuck to my shoes, damp and clinging. The wind shifted, carrying the whisper again, soft, patient, deliberate. The shadows lengthened further, folding over themselves. Branches pressed closer, almost brushing my arms, my hair, my face. The smell of wet bark, metallic and sharp, filled my senses. I moved carefully, slow, careful not to disturb the forest. The whisper lingered, impossible to ignore. It felt present in the air, in the silence, in my own heartbeat. The ground was soft, churned with fallen debris. Each footstep sank slightly, muffled, swallowed by the damp earth. I could feel the forest bending around me, patient, watching. I glanced back. The branches seemed to curl more aggressively, reaching higher, stretching further. Shadows twisted with them, folding and bending into shapes I couldn't name. I breathed slowly, pressing my palms to my legs. The whisper moved with me, drifting on the breeze, brushing against my ears. Every hair on my arms tingled, sensitive to the unseen presence. I stepped away, heart thudding in oppressive silence. The branches swayed still, lingering, patient. Their crooked fingers pressed against the edge of my awareness, and I felt the weight of the forest, its watchful patience, pressing around me. The wind softened, the whisper faded, lingering only as memory. Shadows retracted slightly, but the forest remained alive, twisted, patient, waiting for the next step. I moved slowly, careful, out of the twisted grove. Branches scraped faintly above, almost caressing, almost touching. The storm's aftermath lingered in every smell, every shadow, every soft shift of the wind. And even as the forest opened into clearer space, I could feel the fingers still pressing gently in my mind. The whisper folded into the silence, watchful, patient, waiting. The stream lay still, reflecting the pale sky perfectly. The air smelled of damp earth and cold water, sharp and clean. Mist curled along its edges, soft and clinging to my ankles. The trees around it seemed wrong. Their trunks leaned in impossible angles, branches curling toward the stream. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the water. I knelt at the bank, leaning closer. Ripples distorted shapes, bending them into human-like figures. Faces appeared, pale and wet, staring back at me. None of them were my own. The water lapped quietly against my boots. Each ripple shifted the faces, slow, deliberate. Eyes followed me even when I blinked, patient, unblinking. A splash echoed, loud and sudden, through the forest. It sounded like laughter, hollow and faint. My chest tightened as the echoes lingered, stretching across the misty clearing. I took a step back, water splashing around my ankles. The ripples danced again, forming new faces, grinning and twisting in impossible ways. The mist pressed against my legs, cold, heavy, and damp. I wanted to leave, to run, but my gaze returned. The reflections moved independently, sliding along the surface like smoke. I could feel eyes in the forest, too, pressing from behind, unseen but present. Another splash, smaller this time. The laughter, or something like it, followed, soft and high, fading and returning. It pressed against my mind, gentle but insistent. I ran. Water lapped at my ankles, cold and wet, soaking my shoes. The mist swirled around me, curling up my legs, brushing damp against my skin. Every step echoed, but the giggles persisted, distant and hollow, teasing the edges of my hearing. The trees bent toward the stream as I passed, branches reaching like fingers. Shadows stretched across the water, darkening with each step. I could feel the forest folding around me, patient, waiting. The faces in the water twisted with the ripples, following me as I fled. I didn't look back, but the sense of being watched pressed into my chest. The laughter faded slightly, lingering like a pulse in the mist. I stumbled over roots, boots slippery with wet leaves. The stream narrowed, reflecting only gray sky now, but the memory of those faces remained. Their eyes pressed into my mind, patient, silent, waiting. I slowed at last, reaching the edge of clearing. Mist clung to my hair, cold and wet, carrying the faint, lingering echoes of giggles. The water rippled faintly, still, as if remembering the shapes it had shown me. And even as I stepped into clearer space, I could feel the press of eyes and reflection, the forest folding patiently around the stream, the memory of laughter lingering like a whisper I could not shake. The fog lay thick across the forest, curling over roots and fallen leaves. It smelled of wet earth and cold pine, heavy and persistent. Through it, a cabin emerged, dark and still, windows black and blank. The air around it felt different, denser, cooler, as if the fog itself paused to watch. A soft scent of damp wood and decay lingered, pressing against my nose. The door creaked open on its own, slow, deliberate, inviting, or perhaps warning. I stepped closer, boots sinking slightly into the wet ground. Inside, shapes shifted. Faint outlines moved in the shadows, though the air was still. A cold draft carried the scent of age, damp timber, and something metallic, faint but sharp. I paused at the threshold. The fog pressed against the doorframe, curling like fingers. Every breath I drew felt heavy, tasting faintly of wet wood and silence. A shadow moved again, slipping across the floor, soft and patient, disappearing before my eyes could track it. The cabin seemed to breathe with me, slow, quiet, aware. I stepped back, and the door creaked softly in protest. The fog shifted immediately, curling closer, brushing my legs and shoes. It was as if the forest had noticed me, attentive and patient. The windows reflected only gray fog, swallowing the pale light. Inside, the outlines lingered, blurred and hesitant, teasing the edge of perception. The smell grew stronger, damp and decayed, pressing into my chest with quiet insistence. I ran my hand along the weathered wood, cold, slick with moisture, rough against my skin. The fog seemed to twist with me, curling around my fingers, soft and persistent. Every instinct urged me to leave, yet my feet remained planted. The cabin waited, patient. The fog pressed closer, a living veil of gray, shifting with the smallest movement. I took a single step back, letting the fog embrace my ankles. The outlines inside didn't move now, but I could feel them, patient and still, watching. The air hummed faintly, quiet, pressing against my chest like a slow heartbeat. I moved away from the door. The fog thickened, curling higher, brushing wet against my face. The cabin faded slightly, retreating into the gray, yet its presence lingered, patient and aware. Even as I turned toward the forest path, I could feel the weight of the fog and the cabin's gaze lingering behind me. The smell of damp wood, of quiet decay, pressed against my memory, as though the space itself had marked me, patient and waiting. I walked slowly, soft footsteps swallowed by mist. The fog shifted with each breath, curling and twisting as if alive. And in the silence, I knew the cabin waited, quietly watching, patient, unyielding. The underbrush was thick, dense, pressing against my legs as I stepped. It smelled of wet leaves, moss, and something faintly metallic, cold and hidden. The forest floor was soft, muffling my footsteps, yet alive with movement I could not see. Something brushed past me, too quick to follow. A flicker of shadow among the twisting branches. Rustling whispers echoed in cadence with my heartbeat. They moved around me, light and deliberate, brushing my ears and hair. Each rustle felt familiar, yet wrong, a memory distorted. I caught glimpses of shapes in the thicket. They resembled me, my posture, my gestures, but warped, wrong, fleeting. They slipped between trunks and brambles, patient and teasing. The thicket seemed endless. Every step forward revealed more shadows, more twisted forms. The air was damp, clinging, tasting faintly of earth and wet bark. I paused. The movement stopped. The silence pressed into my chest, heavier than the undergrowth around me. Then a soft brush, like fingers trailing over fabric, tickled my arm. I spun, but the space behind me was empty. Only the whispers lingered, curling in the folds of the fog and leaves. Branches arched above, forming dark tunnels of shadow. Light seeped through and thin, pale slivers, tracing the shapes of unseen watchers. Every sway of a leaf, every crack of a twig, felt amplified, deliberate. I moved cautiously, breath shallow, hands brushing damp leaves. The shapes returned, glimmering at the edge of vision, patient, waiting. The whispers followed, soft, teasing, as though guiding me deeper into the maze. The ground shifted underfoot, roots rising like fingers, tangling with my steps. I stumbled slightly, boots sinking into mud and leaves. A scent of wet earth and decay rose sharply, pressing into my nose. I glanced around. The thicket stretched farther than memory allowed, twisting familiar landmarks into something alien. Shadows moved with impossible grace, slinking over roots and trunks, bending the forest around them. I stopped again. The whispers fell silent, leaving a hum in my chest, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Even the distant rustle of leaves had ceased, as if the world waited with me. Slowly, I stepped forward. Every motion revealed more flickers of shapes resembling me, none quite right, all watching. The air grew colder, damp clinging to skin, pressing lightly like unseen hands. I exhaled, long and quiet. The shadows lingered patient, stretching and twisting among the brambles. The thicket seemed alive, aware, folding in and out around me, waiting for me to notice the wrongness. Eventually, the path widened slightly, leaves giving way to softer soil. I moved into the small clearing, mist curling at my ankles. The shapes and whispers did not follow directly, but their presence remained patient, imprinted in the damp air. Even as I reached the edge of the thicket, I could feel the shadows stretching behind me, the whispers lingering faintly, the forest folding and waiting, patient and aware. I walked on, soft footsteps swallowed by moss and fog. The thicket remained, a living memory of shapes and whispers, patiently watching, waiting just beyond the edge of sight. Dusk settled over the forest, heavy and quiet. The air smelled of damp pine and cooling earth, pressed close against my skin. Shadows stretched long, gray and soft, curling along roots and fallen leaves. A howl rose, distant, low, mournful. It trembled through the air, brushing against my ears, lingering in my chest. I paused, breath shallow, listening. I searched the trees, scanning every darkened trunk. No animal, no human. The forest held only silence, yet the howl continued, patient and deliberate. Each echo repeated me. My own steps seemed mirrored in its tone, my own breath caught in its vibration. It wrapped around the trees, curling through branches, bending the forest into its rhythm. I took a cautious step forward. The sound followed, winding along roots, pressing into my soles, brushing the skin of my ankles. The mist clung heavier now, damp and cold, tasting faintly of earth and rain. I stopped. The howl paused with me, tilting, stretching, bending into silence. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting, patient. Then it came again, faint, distant, matching my heartbeat. A low moan, more shadow than sound, pressing into the spaces between trees. I could feel in my chest, in my ears, in the stillness of the fog. I glanced behind me. The forest remained empty. Only the soft sway of branches, the curling mist, the damp, sharp smell of pine and earth. I moved slowly, every footstep soft against moss and wet leaves. The howl followed, stretching and bending, patient, echoing my movements. It was not an animal, not human, but it was here and it knew me. The sound rose, circling, brushing my ears, curling around the trees. It pressed against the forest floor, brushing roots and leaves with invisible fingers. Each echo mirrored me, my steps, my rhythm, my breath. I stopped again. The howl ceased. Silence fell, thick and heavy, as though the forest had never spoken at all. Even the mist seemed to pause, clinging quietly to my shoes, my hair, my clothes. I took a breath, slow, careful. The forest held me in its quiet, patient and still. The damp earth smelled sharper now, the pine sharper, pressed into my senses. I walked forward, soft footsteps swallowed by moss and mist. The howl did not return, yet its memory lingered, folded into the shadows, pressed into the rhythm of the trees. Every shadow seemed deeper now. Every rustle held a weight of sound, a patience, a presence. The forest was alive, aware, and had whispered something I could not name. And even as the path opened into clearer space, I could feel the echo of the howl in the air, curling around my breath, pressing against my chest, patient, lingering, waiting. Fog drifted low across the forest floor, curling between roots and fallen leaves. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, heavy and still. A faint hum seemed to pulse through the mist, soft, almost imperceptible. Ahead, an enormous oak rose from the ground. Its trunk was wide, the bark flexing subtly as if it breathed. Sap dripped slowly, like liquid amber tears, catching the pale light of the fog. I stepped closer, hand reaching out. The bark was warm beneath my fingers, pulsing gently, alive, the scent of resin mixed with wet earth, clinging to my skin and clothes. The fog thickened, muffling the rest of the forest. Branches swayed without wind, shadows stretching and folding across the mossy ground. Every breath I drew felt heavier, pressed by the quiet weight of the tree. I pressed my palm flat against the trunk. Warmth spread into my hand, rising slowly into my arm. A faint hum echoed through my chest, matching the pulse of the oak. I could feel the forest fading around me. The fog pressed close, soft and damp, masking the world beyond the tree. Leaves whispered overhead, brushing against one another in quiet rhythm. The sap glimmered in the dim light, slow tears moving with the pulse of the trunk. I leaned closer, the air vibrating faintly, as if the tree exhaled around me. Each inhalation of mist carried the scent of bark, resin, and something faintly metallic, like old rain on iron. I stepped back slightly, heart hammering against my ribs. A quiet awe mingled with subtle fear, curling in my chest. The oak seemed to watch, patient, breathing slowly, aware of my presence. Shadows stretched along the ground, elongating my silhouette toward the mist. The fog rolled in gentle waves, muffling the hum of distant insects. The forest felt alive, focused, and impossibly still at once. I traced my fingers along a thick root, smooth and warm under the bark. The hum deepened, pressing softly against my ears, resonating through my chest. It was patient, slow, deliberate, as if the tree itself was breathing with me. I stepped back fully, noticing how small I felt beneath its immense branches. Sap continued to drip, catching the faint light and glistening like tiny lanterns. Each drop echoed faintly in the quiet, a soft punctuation in the silence. The fog swirled, brushing my legs and ankles. Branches shifted subtly, shadows folding over themselves without wind. The oak pulsed with a rhythm that seemed impossibly alive, patient and calm. I exhaled slowly, listening. The mist carried a faint hum, the scent of bark and damp earth, and the warmth of the tree into my senses. Every heartbeat matched the subtle pulse beneath my fingers. I turned, taking soft steps back through the thick fog. The tree remained, patient and breathing, rooted in its quiet rhythm. Its presence lingered in the air, a slow, deliberate reminder of the forest's hidden life. Even as I walked on, the hum followed faintly, echoing through the fog. The warmth, the scent, the pulse of the oak clung to my memory. And somewhere beneath the heavy mist, the forest waited, patient, watching, quietly breathing. The forest lay heavy with mist, each tree obscured by soft gray fog. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, damp and pressing. My boots sank slightly into moss and fallen leaves. Quiet but firm, I followed a faint trail, a thin line of disturbance across the forest floor. But with every step, it seemed to fade behind me, as though the ground itself swallowed it. Footprints vanished, roots rearranged, the familiar turning strange. Markers I had counted on, broken branches, twisted saplings, twisted into forms I did not recognize. The forest hummed softly, a low vibration pressing against my chest. It guided me or deceived me. I could not tell which. A sudden breeze stirred, carrying a whisper. "This way," it murmured, brushing my hair against my face. I followed instinct, yet the path led to nothing, only more fog and twisting shadows. I glanced back. Nothing remained but empty gray air. The trail I thought I had known dissolved into a fog memory. Leaves rustled overhead, moving without wind, brushing each other in soft, deliberate patterns. I could smell the faint resin of pine, mixed with damp soil and something metallic, like iron left in rain. Each step pressed into the mist, soft and silent, yet somehow audible in the emptiness. I moved forward, heart hammering quietly, breath shallow. Shadows seemed to shift at the edge of my vision. A tree that had been leaning one way now leaned another, roots curling like fingers. The hum persisted, steady, faint, guiding, pressing against my chest. I reached a clearing I thought I recognized, but every familiar landmark had altered. A rock outcropping twisted, a fallen log gone. The breeze returned, teasing against my skin, soft, insistent. "This way," it whispered again, carrying the faint smell of wet moss. I followed. The path opened and then ended abruptly, swallowed by thickening fog. I stood, alone listening. The forest held a breathless silence, yet the hum lingered, vibrating through my bones. The trail I had followed was gone, vanished. I took another step, testing the ground, feeling the soft give of moss beneath my feet. Branches overhead swayed without wind, casting slow-moving shadows on the gray floor. The forest shifted subtly around me, alive, patient, aware. Every step became a question. Each sound seemed familiar, then strange. The hum pressed, insistent, like a heartbeat not my own. I tried to trace my steps back, but the fog swallowed everything I remembered. Every tree, every rock, every curve in the trail seemed new and wrong. The forest had claimed the path, and perhaps it had claimed my certainty as well. The whispering breeze came one last time, brushing my cheek. "This way," it said. I hesitated, unsure if I would follow or turn. The fog shifted, curling around my legs, soft and cold, patient and waiting. And I realized the trail I thought I was on, my path, was no longer mine. It dissolved behind me. The forest had moved, and I was left alone, uncertain and quietly afraid. The forest was quiet, the air damp with mist. Pine needles clung to my clothes, cold and sharp against my skin. I moved slowly, each step soft on moss and fallen leaves. A figure sat ahead, pale, still, perched on a moss-covered rock, like it had always been there. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, watching. My breath caught in my throat. Every footstep felt loud, echoing through the muted forest. The hum of insects had stopped. Even the wind seemed to pause. I blinked. It was closer, not by movement I could see, but by some impossible drift, silent and deliberate. I glanced behind me. The path was empty. No footprints, no signs anyone had passed. Only fog and shadows. The figure remained pale, unmoving, yet nearer with each heartbeat. I could smell the damp earth, the faint mossy decay clinging to its stillness. My chest tightened. Each inhale was sharp, brutal against the thick silence. Branches swayed without wind, brushing my shoulders, whispering like static. I stumbled forward, each step careful, yet urgent. The figure followed, perfectly still, never breaking its gaze. Shadows shifted in the fog, lengthening, bending around the trees. I could feel eyes, though perhaps not its own, pressing into my back. The forest seemed alive, holding its breath with me. I tried to run, boots slipping softly on wet leaves. The figure moved with me, unnervingly quiet, closer with every desperate step. I could hear nothing but my own ragged breathing and the subtle, impossible hum of presence behind me. Light flickered through the canopy, pale and hesitant. The figure remained, seated at first, tilting its head, then somehow gliding without sound. I blinked again, and it was nearer, closer than physics should allow. I reached a small clearing. Mist curled around my ankles, clinging, cold, whispering. The figure sat there too, silent, patient, waiting. I slowed, trying to catch my breath, trying to rationalize the impossible. The air smelled of damp pine and something faintly metallic, like iron left in rain. Each sound I made, each footstep, each breath, was amplified in the empty hush of the forest. When I dared to look back, it was almost on me, yet still seated, pale, tilting its head in that wrong, impossible angle. The clearing stretched unnaturally, trees bending slightly toward the figure, toward me. I felt my heart hammering in my ears, felt the tension coil in my chest. I wanted to speak, but the words would not form. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting with me, and then it simply remained, pale and still, watching. I backed away slowly, boots pressing into soft moss, the fog curling around me like a living thing. Its presence did not chase, yet I felt followed, even when I dared not look. The forest swallowed my path behind me. Shadows deepened, fog thickened, and the figure remained unmoving, a silent witness to my fear, patient, calm, impossibly still. I ran, faster, though the forest stretched before me endlessly. Every glance over my shoulder showed the same pale tilt ahead, the same impossible gaze, until the mist swallowed both me and the figure into quiet, shivering emptiness. The forest held its breath. Morning light filtered weakly through heavy branches, pale and still. Air smelled of damp soil and old pine. No wind stirred the leaves. No birds called. Only my own breathing filled the hollow spaces. Leaves quivered where nothing stood. Shadows shifted just beyond my vision. Something followed me unseen, patient. Each step pressed softly on moss and earth. The fog curled around my ankles, cold and slow. The silence thickened, pressing against my ears and chest. I paused. A faint rustle echoed behind me. I turned. Nothing. Footsteps, or the memory of them, traced mine. The forest felt alive, watching, listening. Air smelled faintly metallic, like rain over old roots. Branches moved, though no wind passed. A shadow flickered, stretching across the ground, disappearing when I blinked. My pulse quickened, a low hum beneath the suffocating quiet. The path seemed longer than memory suggested. Markers I knew vanished or warped into shapes I could not name. Fog rose, curling around trunks like fingers, brushing my shoulders. Every rustle made my chest tighten. Every snapping twig echoed sharply, though my steps were soft. The forest silence vibrated, almost as if it were breathing with me. I reached a clearing. Light was pale and uneven, mist curling in delicate spirals. Shadows lingered at the edge, unmoving yet impossibly present. I sensed the invisible presence closer. No form appeared, no eyes stared, but the air carried it. I could feel it trace in my spine, cold, patient. A leaf fell from a branch above, landing softly on my shoulder. I flinched, even though the world around me remained still. The hush returned, heavier than before, pressing in on every side. I walked again. My hands brushed damp ferns, water clinging to my fingertips. Each inhale filled my lungs with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. The rustling followed, subtle, everywhere at once. Sometimes to my left, sometimes behind. I dared not turn, afraid to find eyes staring, or nothing at all. The silence became suffocating. It was not empty. It was listening, waiting, coiling around me like mist. I stumbled slightly over a root, cold dew soaking my boots. A shadow stretched across the clearing, longer than possible, moving against the light. I froze, heartbeat loud in my ears, fog damp on my cheeks. The forest seemed to breathe with me. Every step I took, the rustle echoed. Every pause, it held me. I could not tell where it began, where I ended. I reached a small hollow, roots curling like fingers, the fog pressing closer, muffling the distant world. I stopped. The rustling ceased. Silence returned, but heavier now, denser, almost tangible. I could feel the unseen presence lingering, patient, aware. The forest remained. Still, quiet, waiting. And I walked slowly, softly into the fog, leaving my fear pressed against the mossy ground. The forest was quiet, heavy with fog. Damp leaves pressed under my boots, soft and cold. Twilight lingered, pale and fading, brushing the mist with gray light. Ahead, a lantern hovered. It swayed gently, though the air was still. Its warm glow touched wet leaves, casting fleeting shapes across the ground. I stepped closer. The fog thickened around my ankles, curling like slow smoke. Figures appeared in the corners of the light, vague, shifting, never fully formed. Each step made the forest beneath me, low and subtle, almost like a breath. The lantern's glow glimmered against the mist, revealing hints of movement in the shadows. A twig snapped softly behind me. I turned, but the trees were empty. I reached toward the lantern. Fog rolled over my hands, damp and cold. The light flickered and vanished. Only gray swirled around me now. The world felt hollow, muffled. Leaves glistened with wetness, but no shapes moved. A voice whispered, soft and close, brushing my ear, "You shouldn't be here." I froze. The sound seemed to come from the fog itself. It pressed against my chest, slow and cold. Branches leaned inward, reaching like fingers through the mist. Shadows pulled beneath them, shifting with the faintest hint of motion. I breathed shallowly, tasting the damp earth on my tongue. The lantern was gone. No light remained, yet the fog held a weight, as if watching. Every sound, my boots, my breath, The rustle of leaves was amplified. I moved forward. Fog parted slightly with each step, but the path dissolved behind me. Figures appeared just beyond the edge of vision, then vanished when I looked directly. A soft hum pulsed through the mist, like a memory of sound rather than sound itself. It thrummed in my chest, slow, deliberate. I could feel it in my fingertips as I brushed against wet ferns. The whisper returned, almost playful, yet cold. You shouldn't be here. Closer this time, hovering at the edge of my hearing. My hands trembled. I reached for the space where the lantern had floated, but only fog met my fingertips. It swirled around me, dense and unmoving, holding me in place. Every step made the forest expand unnaturally. The mist twisted into new shapes, always at the edge, never fully revealed. The air smelled of wet pine and earth, sharp with decay. I wanted to turn back. The path behind me dissolved into pale gray, uncertain and wrong. Ahead, nothing but the whispering fog and the memory of light. The forest seemed to breathe in rhythm with me. Shadows shifted subtly, leaning closer, bending toward me in silence. The hum grew faint, pulsing to my bones, soft but unrelenting. I exhaled slowly. The whisper faded, leaving only the fog and the damp earth. No lantern, no figures, only the feeling of being watched, waiting. I stepped forward. The mist pressed around me, thick and cool, wrapping the world in gray. Every heartbeat echoed, a reminder that I was alone and not. The forest held its secret, silent, watching, breathing. And I walked on, the memory of light lingering just beyond reach. The air was damp, carrying the smell of wet earth and moss. Twilight lingered, pale and gray, seeping through the gnarled trees. Branches twisted above, scraping faintly against one another, whispering secrets I could almost hear. I walked slowly. Leaves brushed my arms, cold and wet, stirring the fog around me. Each rustle carried fragments, snippets of words, laughter, and then my name. I froze. The forest seemed to lean closer, drawing me in with soft, curling tendrils of mist. The hum of the unseen swirled in rhythm with my heartbeat, subtle, unrelenting. A name again, mine, whispered under a sighing breeze. I spun, trying to locate the sound. The shadows shifted, but the forest was empty. Fog wrapped around the trunks, thick and clinging. I could smell damp leaves, the faint metallic tang of hidden roots. Branches arched toward me, bending as if curious, fingers brushing my shoulders with wet insistence. The whispers grew. They overlapped, murmuring fragment of conversations I didn't remember having. Moments, questions, laughter, echoes shaped like voices I should know, yet distant. I pressed my hands to my ears. It didn't stop. Each leaf, each brittle twig seemed to carry my name, carrying it deeper into the forest shadow. I stumbled backward. Footsteps vanished into the fog, swallowed before I could trace them. The air vibrated faintly, a low, constant hum threading between the trees. The branches moved with a life of their own. They arched and twisted, brushing the air near my face, trailing cold mist along my skin. Every touch carried a whisper. Every whisper carried weight. I turned to flee. The path behind me dissolved into gray, endless fog. The forest seemed to pulse, stretching, breathing, waiting. The whispers followed, curling around me like smoke. I could no longer tell if the names were called from the leaves or from my own mind. A chill pressed into my chest, slow and deliberate. I slowed, heart hammering. A single branch swayed toward me, carrying a long, drawn-out syllable, my name again. The fog wrapped tighter, muffling sound yet amplifying its presence inside my skull. I tried to step forward, but the ground shifted beneath the mist. Twisting roots curled at my ankles, unseen, tugging lightly. Leaves whispered in cadence with my breath, each exhale carrying my name farther into shadows. I crouched, pressing my palms to the damp earth. The names echoed around me, bouncing between trees, fading, then returning. They carried no malice, only recognition, curiosity, the forest remembering. When I stood, the branches had moved slightly, rearranged as if breathing with me. I felt the fog pressing closer, a living presence, silent yet attentive. The forest waited, patient and unmoving, watching through whispering leaves. I turned again. Each step was hesitant, slow, the whispers curling behind me, soft and persistent. The fog followed, thickened, blanketing the world in gray, holding the names in its folds. I didn't look back. The branches swayed, brushing my skin, murmuring in tones I could barely recognize. The forest carried my name, and I carried its memory, folded into the mist and shadow. And as I walked away, the whispers lingered, soft, persistent, intimate. They stretched into the fog, a quiet reminder that the trees remembered and the forest never forgot. The clearing opened before me, wider than memory should allow. Fog clung to the ground, thick and cold, curling around my ankles with every step. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic, like rain left behind on stones. I moved forward. Each footfall felt heavier, muffled, as if the ground absorbed my steps but refused to let me advance. Shadows lingered at the edges, shifting just enough to match my movements. The forest was silent, except for a low hum, almost imperceptible. I felt it in my chest, a vibration more than a sound, pressing against my ribs. The fog stirred with it, curling around the trunks, weaving between roots like living fingers. I stopped, turned my head slowly. The edge of the clearing had shifted again, a pale, liquid gray border that was never where it had been before. The shadows moved in tandem, mirroring the tilt in my head, the lift of my shoulders. I could feel eyes on me, nothing visible, only present the vibration of the air, the quiet insistence of the clearing. A chill ran down my spine, carrying the faint scent of moss and wet bark deeper into my lungs. I stepped again, and the ground seemed to stretch beneath me. My own footprints vanished almost immediately, swallowed by fog that pulsed lightly with each breath I took. It felt alive, aware, soft rustling whispered from the edges, but no leaves moved visibly. I turned in a slow circle, trying to see what made the sound. Nothing, yet the feeling of being watched grew stronger, threaded into the hum beneath my feet. I crouched briefly, pressing my palms to the damp earth. The vibration throbbed in response, like a heartbeat that belonged to the clearing itself. Shadows shimmered in the fog, moving closer without ever crossing the pale gray threshold. I rose, breath shallow. Every step forward felt like walking in place. The farther I moved, the further the clearing stretched, endless and merciless. A single thought lingered in my mind. I was not alone, not in the way the forest had been before. Something patient, something unseen, observing, reflecting me. The fog pressed closer, cold and clammy, curling around my legs and the hem of my clothes. I tried to call out, a quiet whisper into the gray, but no sound emerged, only the hum, low and steady, rising and falling like a pulse beneath the clearing. The air vibrated against my ears, my teeth, threading attention through every nerve. I turned again, and the border of the clearing had moved. It wasn't a boundary. It was fluid, pliable, stretching silently like smoke in a room with no windows. Shadows flickered at its edge, mimicking me still perfectly, but impossibly. I began to move faster, though my feet hardly seemed to carry me. Fog swirled, brushing my cheeks with wet fingers. The hum pressed louder, deeper into my chest, a resonance that carried my own pulse back at me. Breath quickened. The clearing stretched infinitely in every direction. Every step forward, every glance behind revealed nothing new, yet the sensation of being mirrored, traced, followed, persisted. I stumbled, hands grazing the misted ground. Cold settled deep into my palms, grounding me in the now, but the now was shifting, slipping. The clearing had no corners, no end, only soft, undulating fog and shadows that bent to my shape. I paused, heart hammering. The vibration beneath me slowed slightly, teasing, as if aware of my hesitation. The shadows at the edge froze, then leaned forward subtly, fluid and watchful. I exhaled. The clearing remained, endless, quiet, humming softly under the weight of fog and shadow. I could feel it remembering each step, each motion, each breath I took, and I realized it would never release me. Slowly, reluctantly, I turned again, tracing a path that no longer existed. Shadows followed. The fog clung. The hum continued, steady and knowing. I walked on endlessly. Alone, the fog lay thick across the clearing. It hugged the ground, clinging to my boots and the damp moss. The air smelled faintly of wet pine and earth, sharp and clean. I moved slowly, careful not to disturb the silence. A soft rustle brushed past. Just the wind, I thought. And then I saw it. A figure emerged, shifting from the gray, its edges blurred. I could not make out features. It was tall, deliberate in its movement, each step measured and slow. I stepped closer, curiosity pressing against caution. The figure drifted backward, keeping a space that seemed unnatural. Every movement it made was fluid, controlled, as if aware of my thoughts. The fog thickened between us, curling around its shape like smoke. I could feel it pressing into my senses, the damp air heavy on my skin. Each inhalation brought the faint scent of something faintly floral, sweet and distant, impossible place. I tried to peer closer. Its face remained a soft blur, featureless yet familiar, like a half-remembered dream. I blinked, and it shifted again, retreating silently, always out of reach. Footsteps crunched softly on the moss beneath me. The figure mirrored my pace, but never allowed distance to shrink. The clearing felt smaller, confined, though the fog made it seem infinite. I breathed slowly, listening. The hum of the forest, wind, distant birds, was swallowed by the thick gray. Even my own pulse sounded loud, echoing in my chest. I reached out, hand trembling slightly. The figure shifted away as if pulled by invisible threads. Cold air brushed against my fingertips where contact might have been, leaving a faint tingling. Time stretched. Minutes might have passed, or hours. The fog made them indistinguishable. I could sense its presence more than see it, a gentle pressure at the edge of perception. I tried speaking softly, a whisper carried by the mist. No words emerged, only the sound of my own uneven breathing. The figure remained, silent, patient, observing. I stepped closer again. It leaned slightly back, its body a fluid shadow, always maintaining that perfect, impossible distance. The mist thickened further, curving around its shape until I could barely tell where it ended and the fog began. For a moment, I froze. The world beyond the figure vanished. I could hear only the soft rasp of air through trees, the hum of moisture on leaves, and my own shallow heartbeats. Then it was gone. The fog rolled gently, leaving empty gray in its place. The figure had vanished as though it had never been. I blinked, wondering if my eyes had played tricks. The air remained damp and heavy, carrying faint scent of pine and something sweeter I could not name. Shadows stretched long and indistinct across the mossy ground. A shiver ran down my spine. I questioned what I had seen. Was it real, or a trick of the fog, the forest, and my own mind? I stepped forward slowly, the mist pressing around me, silent, cold, almost knowing. I could feel the space where it had been, empty yet still present. Breath left shallow clouds in the chill air. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me. Every sense sharpened, sound, smell, touch, all heightened by the lingering absence. I took another step, and then another. The clearing stretched on, empty yet full of the memory of what had been. I felt it watching, or perhaps the fog remembered, and I realized perhaps some things are never truly gone. The air in the pine forest is cold. It's the kind of cold that seeps right through your jacket, that a deep, damp chill that I pull my collar tighter, but it doesn't help. The trees here are so tall they block out most of the sky. What's left is just a pale, gray light. IT feels like evening, even though I know it's only midday. My footsteps make no sound on the bed of brown needles, or at least they shouldn't, but I can hear them dot a soft crunch. Then another, and another, but the rhythm is all wrong. It's like an echo, like someone is walking a half step behind me, matching my pace exactly. I stop walking. The forest holds its breath. The echo stops a moment too late. Crunch. Then silence, at a complete and total silence, and oh, birds. No wind in the branches. Just a dull hum in my own ears that's a low, vibrating hum. The kind you only hear when everything else is gone. I start walking again, a little faster this time. The echo starts up again, keeping perfect time, and my heart begins to beat in my throat. I can feel the mist now that is rising from the ground, thin and white at first, that IT curls around the base of the trees like smoke. IT wraps around my ankles, out a wet, clinging feeling. The faster I walk, the thicker the mist gets. It's up to my knees now. IT presses against my skin. It's not just cold, it feels heavy, like it's pushing down on my thoughts, making them slow, making them fuzzy. The hum in my ears get a little louder. It's not a scary sound. It's almost like a lullaby to a soft, droning song just for me. I try to remember the path. I try to picture map I looked at this morning, but the images are blurry. The trail behind me is gone, swallowed by the white. The trees ahead all look the same, endless rows of dark, rough bark. The shadows between them are deep. They don't look like empty space. They look solid, like black velvet curtains. I stop again, my chest feeling tight. This time, the echoing footsteps don't stop. They take two more crunch, crunch, before fading away to as if whatever was following me has walked right up to my back, and is now standing there, waiting. I don't want to turn around. I can't turn around. MY body won't listen. I just stare straight ahead, into the mist and the shadows. The hum is the only thing I can hear. It's a song of isolation that IT tells me I'm the only person left in the world, that this forest goes on forever, that I've always been here. And then I feel a slow, quiet acceptance. The fear is still there, a cold stone in my stomach. But the struggle is leaving me that's too tired to fight this. Too heavy to run. The mist is up to my waist now. IT feels like cool hands holding me in place. The shadows in front of me, they shift. Not a lot. Just a gentle swaying. Though there is no wind, point one of them seems to peel itself away from a tree. IT stands there, a tall, dark shape where nothing was a moment before. It doesn't move toward me that IT doesn't need to. It's just present, acknowledging my acceptance. I take a slow, shaky breath. The air smells of wet earth and old pine. The shadow and I, we stand together in the silence. The hum settles into a gentle vibration, not a part of the forest, not a part of me now. I close my eyes. The forest has swallowed everything familiar. The path home. The memory of the sun. The sound of my own name, but it's just me and the shadows and the soft, whispering mist. And the feeling that this is exactly where I was always meant to be.